Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for a little of your time today. I really appreciate it. I know everyone's busy and spending a little time going through a webinar. Really appreciate you sharing some time with us. So I'm going to jump right in, but before I do, please feel free to ask questions as we go through the webinar today. There is a function that you have inside your GoToMeeting that allows you to raise your hand or type in the chat, and we'll field all questions. So don't hesitate. Happy to field questions as we go along today. Okay? So just jumping right in here, the picture you see here is a client of mine. We'll call him Dave. This was his reaction right after he was told that their IT guy had quit and he was going to be managing IT. Actually, all that's a lie, but this is a common reaction that CFOs have. There's a lot to do when IT falls to CFO. We're going to cover a lot of that today, and we're going to give you a lot of tools to make your lives easier as you manage IT. So the one thing in many webinars that I've gone through is oftentimes you get good information, right? Ideas. All that stuff is very wonderful and neat and all that stuff. But we're going to try and do a little more than that today. We're going to try and give you things that you can actually use, takeaways that will make your world easier, not just the ideas and the information, but things you can use. So what does that mean? So we'll talk about overseeing IT. What does that mean? What does it mean from the CFO standpoint, so on and so forth. We'll talk about the situation. There's a general situation that CFOs sort of walk into when they begin managing IT. We'll cover that. We'll talk about the challenges and finding the challenges and overcoming them, because there are some common ones, and we can often circumvent them by knowing they're going to happen and being ahead of the game. We'll talk about a structure that works well for managing IT, and this is going to be the meat sort of our discussion today. It's going to revolve around three concepts, which are define, plan, and report, and we'll go through each one in pretty good detail, and we'll cover how that will make not only your lives easier, but will turn out good results for the business. And then I'm going to encourage you to think about IT maybe just a little bit differently. The world of IT is changing quite a bit, and I think CFOs are in an amazing position to be a huge benefit to organizations when they manage IT. So I'll give you some thoughts about ways to think about IT that could be helpful to you. And then above all, in the information that I give you today, I have some tools that I'll share with you afterwards. Make it yours. It's the most important thing. One of the neat things about IT today is that it can be so customized for any business. And that customization can cause some complexity, but it's also where a lot of the value is driven. So then how we're going to do this, believe it or not, I know it's an IT presentation, but we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to give you lots of information, but I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to give you ways to act on that information that's a lot easier than all the complexity that IT normally presents. And then I always joke with people, this is an IT presentation. I always joke with people, if you don't have caffeine for an IT presentation, well, we'll try and make it as enjoyable as possible, but caffeine never hurts. So who am I and why are you listening to me today? It's always a good question, right? I have been in the IT industry for 17 years, and I've done lots of different jobs. So I hold multiple technical certifications. They're pretty aged these days, but I began my career as a network administrator and cut my teeth in the industry, managing servers and workstations and people. I owned an IT firm, this IT firm actually, and ran it for 9 years. So my expectation today is that I'm not just going to give you IT information and technical information. There's some value there, but the greater value really lies in the business aspects of IT. And I think those are the things where I'm finding CFOs are finding the most value in managing IT from their role. And then just a couple other things. I've been involved with hundreds of projects, either as the technical resource, from a project management standpoint, from an oversight, or from even helping organizations find the right solution. I've hired dozens of IT people. In any role that CFO plays in IT, at some point in time, dialogue with the IT group, the IT consulting firm, IT people in general is a necessary part of that role. And there are certain ways and tools and techniques that are more successful. I've come to believe over the course of my career that can be helpful in doing that. So I'll share those with you as well, please. And I've completely created well over 100 IT plans and budgets. And we'll talk about IT planning versus roadmaps and where budgets come into play. And I've consulted with hundreds of businesses, so lots of hundreds there. So I'd like to start out with a common story, how it works when a CFO is handed oversight. Sometimes it happens all at once, sometimes it happens a little bit organically, but most times the house is a little bit on fire when they get it. Generally something bad happens. Occasionally something good happens. I've seen where organizations have so many sales coming in that they need to improve or create new systems for IT for the new customers. Those are the fun ones, but it doesn't happen as often, unfortunately, as something's broken. We lost a client, something like that. So the CEO or any of the other business leadership team turns to the CFO for help. Well, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, there is a normal situation that happens. And this happens generally before the CFO is involved, and they walk in to very little success criteria for IT. And we'll talk about that today. It's one of the largest reasons why IT tends to fail in organizations, because there's no success criteria. What is successful IT for your organization? It'll be a big part of what we talk about today. There's little structure. How soon do we get back to people when they have a problem? What are our expectations? How does it all work? How do we manage compliance? Lots and lots of IT people today are really talented, creative, and technically savvy people. But the structure component, it's not unusual for that to be missing. So, and we also find that our IT team or even our IT consultants, their business acumen isn't their strongest suit. So we get a lot of technical information and not as much business information. It tends to make us as CFOs translators, and it takes a lot of time and effort. We'll talk about how to get past that barrier today. We also find, both from the management and IT, and even sometimes from users, that there's resistance to change. When we bring these ideas forth, better ways to do things, you know, organizations in general can be resistant to change, and we generally find that's the case here as well. The one thing that's always interesting to me is that you generally find that a lot of people don't care as long as their stuff works. And we see it in the simple success criteria that organizations have for their IT. Oftentimes it runs. That's successful to us. We're going to talk about how we can do much better than that today. And the last thing is there just aren't many training tools or resources for CFOs or really any non-technical manager who's overseeing IT. We're going to change a little bit of that today. So let's talk about what this job is, overseeing IT, right? Because for a lot of different organizations, it means a lot of different things. In general, though, it's everything between the IT team and the CEO, which is a huge amount of responsibility. We're going to simplify it today, though. It tends to be hiring and managing the right people or consultants, analyzing and improving projects, looking at them, deciding which projects are right, which ones are good, which ones lend the greatest business value, explaining everything to the leadership team or the CEO, and we'll talk about fulfilling that role as a translator and how we can make that easier. Making sure the right technology is deployed, managing IT costs. This is an area that CFOs are very good at traditionally, and we'll talk a little bit about some tools to do that as well. And keeping the company compliant. And then, of course, fielding complaints, because no matter how good IT is, there's always users that have issues or didn't get service at the right time, or management's looking for a different report. We'll talk about how to create a structure to handle all of that today. And, of course, when we're overseeing IT, it tends to be that we're accountable for all of it. So let's talk about some industry numbers here very quickly before we get into the meat of the conversation. 93% of senior finance executives surveyed believe that the CFO of the future will need a much stronger technology skill set. And we are seeing that more and more and more. Lots of reasons for this, mostly because the CEO really doesn't want that job, nor does he or she have time for that job. And the CFO normally has budgetary control over the IT budget. That's what generally tips the scales. So more and more it's moving to the CFO as opposed to any other C-level position. 4 to 5 respondents believe that their organization's IT strategy is an essential component. Sounds pretty basic, right? When you see this, the information up there, it's like, well, of course it is. It's interesting how many organizations don't have an IT strategy. And we'll talk about how to create that today. Currently, 42% of all departments report to the CFO. Talked about that on the last slide a little bit, why that is. Starts with the budgetary responsibility and it grows from there traditionally. And even back in 2014, 19% of CFOs, there was a growth in their request to handle IT. So it's all moving this way. And like I said, there's just not a lot of good information out there, so we'll fix that here today. So now I'm going to give you my numbers as well. And they're a little bit different from industry numbers, but I like to add these because industry numbers can be at times self-serving. This is what I see. I work with a number of CFOs and other people C-level in business every day. Here's what I see in terms of organizations that don't have a CIO. Less than 10% of CFOs really actually want this job. The interesting part is more than 80% of them are willing to oversee IT. And where we see the difference here between these two statistics are that CFOs are traditionally asked to do much more than manage finances these days. They're asked to dabble in HR. They're asked to figure out the sales commission. They're asked to manage IT, right? So most CFOs that I work with would be happy to manage IT. We just necessarily want more added to their plate. Most CFOs already have budgetary responsibility over IT, which I'll contend throughout this presentation today is actually a good thing. Less than 10% of CFOs really have the true knowledge and expertise to create a strong IT strategy. And why this is so important is very few IT people do either. So this tends to go unfulfilled in organizations, and it leads to some real problems. And then, as we saw on a previous industry slide, the vast majority of CFOs believe that a stronger skill set would be helpful in performing their jobs. So, the good news, we want to be jumping like the gentleman in the right-hand side there, right? There really is a pretty simple way to have a strong IT plan. You don't have to have an insane amount of IT knowledge or experience. Know that your IT team or consultant is good. A lot of people, CFOs, they don't have the tools. Like the measurements they use for their IT group is things run, or they're available when things go wrong. We can do a lot better, and we can show it. And in the things that we're going to do today, we can set up our IT team and consultant for success. So even though we'll experience some resistance initially, we will come out the other side with our IT group really loving us, the management group loving us, and many times we'll be the heroes even to the users. We'll not only be able to show other business leaders that IT is running well, but we'll be able to show them why. And this is a critical component because otherwise everyone lives inside their own paradigm, right? I didn't get support for IT, for my problem for 4 hours, things like that. We're going to be able to pretty easily be able to create some measurements and show why IT is running well, or in certain cases why it's not. I call it IT apathy, and this is the it runs sort of experience. There is so much that IT can do well for businesses that can really move them forward. A lot of times the complexity holds people back, and this applies to CFOs pretty often because most of them are not IT experts, right? We're going to talk about why you don't have to be, but it'll be important to address the IT apathy that can be present in many organizations. And this knowledge and this experience, which isn't very difficult to do, is going to help us be even more indispensable in our jobs. Like there are few roles within organizations today that are more indispensable than the CFO. And it's not only because of the financial aspects to it, but the CFOs we talk about play so many other roles than just a financial role. So the three cornerstones to our approach are going to be to define, plan, and report. So let's get into it. So defining good IT. This is the largest reason why IT fails, or we have miscommunication, or expectations aren't set appropriately. I can't tell you how many times I have been involved with organizations where the IT group was doing a fantastic job and management was not pleased with it. They didn't know many times. So it's important to start with what I call targets. What is good IT for your organization? Now, as we go through this, this part here, I'll go a little bit quicker. I want to stay true to my half-hour timeline and leave 10 minutes for questions. But beyond this, I will email you personally a template for defining good IT. So in line with my goal to not just provide you information and ideas, but things you can use, this template, the good IT template, which you see a picture of on the left, it walks you through this process. And I have some more of these documents I'll send you as we go through. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but please know that you'll have a guide that I'll send to you following this. Good IT is the foundation of everything you're going to do. It's the start. Without it, you just cannot be successful. What we want to do is define good IT for your company. IT can do so many things, but one of the things that's great about that is it can be very specific to your organization. So we want to make sure we tailor it that way. It's going to help us define who's responsible, and it's going to set our abilities or set and define what we're going to measure. So in all these cornerstones, defining good IT, planning good IT, and measuring it, I'm going to try and give you the reality of the situation, how things really work once you get engaged in this process. So the reality of good IT is it's whatever moves your business forward. It's not some super complex, difficult sort of approach. It doesn't need to be that way. In fact, we're going to talk a lot of ways about how we're going to simplify things. But keep in mind, no matter how complex things get, if you go back to whatever moves your business forward, you're going to be in good shape. And we're going to talk about how to do that. We're going to do specific work within the strategic plan that's going to deliver that. In practice, this generally means three things. Good IT generally means that you're satisfying the specific needs of the business. Talk about how we do that, and that's going to touch on our strategic plan. We're also going to talk about how we satisfy user needs. Okay, and critically important is to set expectations for both. So how do we do good IT? Let's walk through it. So we're going to define our business and users. We're going to divide it out into two categories. What is the business need? What are the users' needs? We're going to establish success criteria for both. So what that generally means on a business level is that we're going to talk about how we're going to deliver services. IT really is a service delivery industry when we're talking about how we satisfy the needs of the business. Generally, that's email, remote access, your access to your CRM program, line of business application, whatever it might be, including reporting and analytics. So we need to deliver these services to people, and they need to be functional and they need to work. If we just start off by creating a list of what this is, it makes it pretty easy to move forward. Uptime, pretty straightforward. We need our systems up and available to be to make sure that we're delivering our services, right, to our users and to management and other people. One thing to note about uptime is how we define it. It's important, it's traditional, and I think it's correct to define it as unscheduled downtime, okay? And the reason for this is every system needs downtime for maintenance, for if there's a security risk, things like that. We're going to talk about how we communicate to everyone so that we can help them be aware of when we have that. But uptime being defined as unscheduled downtime is generally the best place to start. Regulation and compliance. More and more industries are having pressure on regulation and compliance pressure on them, right? Whether it's PCI, whether it's industry-focused, financial, or medical, whatever it may be, we have to address it, and addressing it up front or making decisions on it before it becomes a problem is always a better way to go. And then finally, risk and disaster recovery. It's the insurance. The disaster recovery is the insurance of the IT industry, right? If everything blows up, how long will it take for us to be fine? Now, that's a bit oversimplified, but really you don't need more than that when you're defining good IT, okay? And the last note about this is risk. Every single conversation you have about IT should include dialogue about risk. whether it's risk of doing a project or risk of not doing a project. With IT comes risk. It's an important component. So from a user standpoint, we're going to talk about response time for issues. Satisfying the user needs is a little bit more simple generally, and we're going to talk about communication expectations. So all of this, once again, is included in the good IT template, and it walks you through the process. So once we have good IT built, now we can build our strategic plan because we have targets for it. Now we know what we're trying to accomplish. So a good strategic plan has a number of components. First of all, it meets good IT expectations, right? We didn't do all that work on developing good IT to have it disappear in the plan. It specifically, and I can't emphasize that heavily enough, it specifically ties to the initiatives of the business, and I'll show you how to do that here coming up. Tied to a budget, right? As every CFO knows, every project, every business has constraints, and the budget is generally one of the largest defining constraints. This is work that CFOs are generally very good at, so no strategic plan, I don't even consider it a strategic plan unless it includes the budget. It includes a timeline. You can make your timeline for your strategic plan anything you want as long as it's a year. I say that a bit in jest, but it's important. Here's why. If your horizon, your timeline for your strategic plan is longer than a year, you're probably selling yourself short, and you're probably not setting the best expectations with management. Here's why. Most times, so let's say a business is operating on a calendar year. Most of the time, that budget has to be done, and the strategic plan has to be done in November, early December. So in most cases, you still have projects that happen in the fourth quarter. So our timeline that we set as a year is actually generally 13 or 14 months because we need to have it set a month or two beforehand. So extending that is generally unrealistic because business and IT changes too quickly. Even since the beginning of 2007, there are new opportunities, new tools, new resources. IT moves business, and putting this information out there in a longer time frame really isn't unrealistic. Now, on the flip side, I do recommend people look at an IT roadmap that can extend to 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever you want. I think that's a good tool for that, but not your strategic plan. It's going to include your projects. It's going to say what projects you're doing, when you're doing them, and what the value each project provides the business. So that's in many ways how we're going to tie back to the initiatives of the business. And then it's measurable. Here's a note about this. Most of the IT provides value in 3 ways and only 3 ways. Efficiency, productivity, and competitive advantage, okay? No matter how IT provides value, it falls into one of those 3 categories, right? Normally that means that a lot of intangibles, it provides a lot of intangible value to business. We're going to do everything we can to make it measurable because otherwise it makes it almost impossible to make decisions, good decisions, on IT. So the reality of strategic planning, this is going to be some of your most difficult work that you'll do. It's not particularly easy, but I can tell you once you go through it, you really don't need to do too much more year after year. Okay, so it does. Once you do it once, you can do about 80% of the work, and then year over year, it's a lot easier. So a couple things to know going in. Your IT team, they're probably buried. And keep in mind, oftentimes they're in a mindset to keep their head down. They have a success criteria of IT runs, and they're going to do everything they can to be available whenever things are needed because that's what's been asked of them in the past. So when you bring strategic planning to them, it's a different thing. And it's not always the most warmly received, but we'll talk about ways to make that happen. You get what other business leaders want. A lot of times other business leaders will want to circumvent this process. They'll tell you about their want, their specific silos. I highly recommend you do this strategic plan and don't succumb to just those simple silos. You get the it's obvious. Or email failed 4 times in the last year. We obviously need to move it to the cloud. Resist it. But this process works, and it works well, and you can be held accountable to it, and you can be proud of it. Don't circumvent it for other business leaders or even your IT group that's start with, it's obvious. The strategic plan is your bridge. It's the bridge between your good IT and your measurement of what you're doing. It's the critical component. It's the middle one. So again, shortcutting it is pretty dangerous. One thing to note, and this is one of the concepts about thinking about IT a little bit differently, is I would encourage everyone to think of strategic planning as a creative exercise. Indeed, there's budget, there's numbers, there's a lot of the other stuff in there, but it generally is a creative exercise. The best strategic plans are the ones that started with the greatest amount of viable possibilities. Your IT team may not be used to this type of creative work. Okay, you might have to open them up to it. I've been seeing more than one situation where we've encouraged IT to be creative. They come back with kind of the same stuff. So be prepared that you might have to train IT and say, listen, I'm open to all these options. Even if you think it might not be the perfect option, throw it my way. And you'll be glad you did. IT people are generally very good at being creative. They're just not used to it. So again, I have another template for this. And we'll send it to everyone afterwards. So you'll have the opportunity to walk through this process. It'll make it a little less painful. So what to do? Start with the business initiatives. Every business has a plan for the year. There are things they're trying to achieve. We want to grow revenue 7%. We want to increase profitability by 19%. We want to launch a new business line. We want to open a new office. Whatever those business initiatives are, list them. That's where we're going to start, because if we don't tie our value in IT to what's good for the business, then it's impossible to make a good decision on IT. So here's where we're going to get recommendations from our IT consultant or our internal IT group. I strongly encourage you to require all these recommendations come to you with at least three things. Certainly a description of what the recommendation is, but what is the cost? What is the value that it will provide the organization? And what is the risk? If you have those from your IT group, team, consultant, it's going to shortcut your process on this considerably. And keep in mind, we're not in the role of being IT experts. That's not what we're hoping to do here, right? We're not going to go back to school and get, the bits and bytes. We're asked to oversee IT, and that's really a matter of making technology work for the business. So the third thing then you'll do is you'll have lots of good information as to review and decide. Really, you're just going to make a business case for each one of them. I have a template that I will send you for that as well. I encourage, quick aside here, I encourage every CFO that I work with to train their IT group or team to present every recommendation that they have, every idea they have in terms of a business case. Otherwise, we become translators, and it's not effective. We're not IT people. That's not our job. So after the webinar, I'll email you a template for that as well. Okay? But we got to make our business case. We got to look at those from a business standpoint and say what makes sense. We're going to pick the best ones, and we're going to budget for it. So now we've got our business initiatives. We're tying IT to it. We've got our recommendations, and we've got a budget for it. Then we're going to present it to the leadership team, just like most other strategic initiatives. You're going to get some pushback. Some of this process will be warmly received, and on the whole it is, but in every business there is the can't doer or the naysayer. Expect to get a little bit of pushback, and that's okay. That's all right. We'd rather address those concerns up front, and that's a good process. And then we're going to go back to IT. We're going to revise what we have for our plan, and we're going to update it again, and we'll present it until it's right. So that's our strategic plan. Now that we're done with two of our three legs, the last one tends to be the easiest. It's reporting. Pretty simple. When I talk about reporting, it's measuring. We're going to try to measure the value that IT is providing. Not only value, but we're going to try to show that IT is either doing well or it's not doing well or somewhere in between. And there are three elements to this, very basic. We got to have good data. We have to have a way to gather it, and we have to have a way to present it. Pretty straightforward. Most importantly, this shows your work. You're going to do a lot. As you can see, there's a body of work here. But once you get through it the first time, it's a lot easier, and people will really love it once we have it done. So this shows your work, shows we're doing. It creates accountability as well, not only with users or other business leaders, but with the IT team too, and that's a good thing. It's gonna, you'll be amazed at the insights you get on what you can do to improve technology for your organization when you measure what you're doing, just like anything else. And it's interesting to me because most businesses measure most everything: revenue, expenses, sales, pipeline, utilization, whatever it may be for your business. IT deserves the same value, because a lot of businesses don't do this, and you'll be really impressed at what you find when you start putting some numbers together. So, how does this work in the real world when we measure results? And here's the good news: this is actually a little easier than you might imagine. So, it makes more work initially. So you saw the people on the last slide. When you talk about measuring IT, so there's only one thing that's a little more dry than IT, talking about measuring IT, right? And part of it is because it makes more work initially, especially from your IT team. You're going to ask them to use certain processes that are going to add a little more administration onto their world. That's not going to be the needs conversation until you have data that shows them that they're doing a great job. So once you measure it, your leadership team is going to look like the people on the right here. They're going to love it. But keep in mind, it does make a little more work initially, okay? You're going to get resistance again. You're going to get the isn't obvious kind of discussion. Stay true to the plan, because the numbers will tell the story. You will get some inaccurate claims. You will get one or two people within there, whether it's even IT saying there's no way I have time for this, or other people that say, listen, email's been down 10 times in the past year. I must have lost, I don't know how much in productivity, right? Without numbers, we can't really dispute that. We can't say that that's correct or incorrect. Once you do this for a quarter or two, everyone's going to consider it unthinkable not to measure IT. And we're going to simplify it. So the last thing to hear is that your value to the business, and we talk about how valuable the CFO role is and how many things you're doing, your value is going to increase when you do this work. So how do we do it? First of all, sell the idea to IT. And a couple thoughts on how to do this. This is going to add a little bit of administrative overhead, as we talked about, but when you're looking at IT salaries, when we're looking at getting new projects in to save IT from living on this 7-year-old server that they have to check every weekend, things like that, this is what makes a difference to IT, helping them understand that things are going to get better and we're going to have more information to make very good decisions about IT. I would recommend starting with only 3 reports. Certainly add other reports if you find it valuable, but these are generally very simple reports. The only other thing that I might recommend is that you just keep tabs on budgetary numbers and where you are against the budget that generally falls into the CFO's wheelhouse anyhow. So the 3 reports I recommend are uptime. You can deploy software that's just going to be able to give you this number at the push of a button. There's even free software that'll do it. So this isn't very difficult to do. Generally, this is an automated function that when you need an uptime report, it'll tell you how much your systems have been up for the last day, week, month, year, all that stuff. Pretty straightforward. Your projects are going to tie to the initiatives of the business generally. Managing those well, showing where the projects are at and where they are against the budgets and timeline. That's a little bit of manual work, maybe Excel, some other things, but it's really important. It's a great communication tool for management users as well. And then IT response time to issues. I encourage you to use this metric as opposed to resolution timelines for this reason. A lot of times, IT can shortcut resolution timelines by spending more money. Well, that desktop I've been working on for 2 hours. Let's just buy a new one. What we're shooting for here is the greatest value between our time and effort, the money we spend, and the productivity, efficiency, or competitive advantage we get from our time in IT. So generally, response time is a good metric to show that IT is responsive and working on issues. I'd automate as much as possible. So when we talk about IT response time, oftentimes we really, in the IT parlance, it's a ticketing process. How do we manage things? Everything goes in as tickets, so on and so forth. You will get some resistance from IT on this. I've got tools and resources on how to make that go. And then additionally, I'm building another template for this right now, so you can have a starting point for an IT response process, a ticketing process, and how that might work. But ultimately, automate as much as you can. And then keep it simple. Excel and built-in reports everywhere you can, because for most organizations, this is a leap way ahead of where they're already at, and just these few simple reports can make a world of difference. So, bringing it all together, a couple parting thoughts that I'll leave you with. One, when you define, plan, and measure, what you're really doing is you're creating targets, you're creating a process, and you're showing proof of your work. I really recommend you stay strong on all three. If we eliminate any one of the three, the process really does fall apart. Set expectations, and then set expectations. As we all know, we're all incredibly busy these days. Users and management, other management team members, they will forget. That's part of the reason why we report. That's part of the reason why we create the budget and the strategic plans, so that we have this stuff written down. And then delegate. Once again, IT is not our craft. That's not, we're not going to go doing patches on the server, things like that. Your IT group, most organizations don't ask enough of their IT group in this regard to be creative, to be involved with some of the business aspects of the organization, these types of things, okay? So, and a lot of times this will fall on very soft ears. A lot of IT people I work with would be thrilled to be more engaged. Make it mandatory. I really recommend that you don't round any corners on this, especially with the ticketing process or the service process. Make it mandatory. Make it consistent. Otherwise, your numbers won't be good, and you'll have done a lot of work here for not enough reward. The bulk of the work is the first time, as I mentioned. I've got a question here. I'll address that in just a moment. The bulk of the work is done the first time around. When you go through all these documents, it does take a little time. Even if we simplify it and say, I just use these templates and here we go, it takes thought. It takes engagement with the IT team. It takes selling it to the management group. Keep in mind, 80+% of the work is one time. After that, year over year, it really is a breeze in comparison to it. Your group, whether it's IT or other management leaders, will go from resistance to this process, and some will love it. Some will, take it on right away and be open to it. You always get some resistance, though. Pretty quickly, within 2 quarters at the most, they'll realize how valuable it is. And then, above all, as you saw from the early parts of our presentation today, this is being asked more and more of CFOs. If you have this skill set, it really is valuable across nearly every industry. And it can help CFOs do amazing things for business. So I've got one question here I'll address right away, and then I'll open it up to others. So the question here is, what exactly is an uptime report? Uptime of the network, servers, computers? Great question. So generally, you can manage all of them, okay? What I recommend is that you measure uptime for the critical components. Those traditionally are your servers, your internet access, your routers, switches, and firewalls. Those components, if you know, because those affect connectivity, and those affect everyone. Generally, if a server's down, you have more people down. If a desktop's down, that hurts productivity for sure, but it's not the same. So there's many software tools actually. Network monitoring tools are kind of the key term that you might want to look for, that you can load on your systems, and they just have reports built in for that. So you can just literally click it anytime you want. And they'll do a lot more for you. They'll do system health reports and all those other things, and it's all automated if it's set up and running well. Other questions? Hopefully that answered your question. If not, certainly I'm happy to go into a little bit further. Other questions today? Okay, well, as we adjourn here, a couple parting thoughts. As I mentioned, I will send out the templates to everyone so you have them to use. We will send out the slide deck as well, or a recording of the slide deck. You can go to itprosusa.com, the technical CFO, and you can download any of these documents. And I have other documents and tools there. I encourage you to visit it frequently because I'm adding to those every single week. This is a big job, and more CFOs are being asked to do it, and there just aren't good resources out there to do it. So I'm trying to help with that. The other thing that I will do is I have a LinkedIn group. I just started it, so there's not a ton of members, but I'll invite everyone. Keep in mind, I might have to be linked with you personally before I do, and if that's the case, I'll send you a personal LinkedIn invitation to connect. But I'll invite you to the group. I encourage you to join the group. It's growing. You can find articles and more information that I post weekly on all these types of things, and it includes more access to the documents as well. And then finally, you have access to me, quite literally. In presenting and doing these things for other CFO groups, we have some construction going on, so if you hear that in the background, my apologies. Anyhow, so use me. I come in, I give people 2 hours free consultation. I can probably cut your timeline working with all these documents in half in just 2 hours. I've done this work a lot. I've done it often. I've worked with CFOs, and I've built all these tools. Don't hesitate. You see my contact information there? Genuinely, I'm happy to help. Any parting questions before we adjourn? Well, once again, thank you, everyone, for a little bit of your time today. Hopefully you found it valuable, and stay tuned. I'll be doing more presentations for CFOs specifically in the future. Thank you, everyone.